It was March 8, 2014, at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 prepared for its routine journey to Beijing. On board were 239 people, passengers and crew from 14 different countries. The Boeing 777-200ER was one of the safest aircraft in commercial aviation. The weather was clear. The flight plan, ordinary. At 12:42 a.m., Flight MH370 lifted off the runway, climbing steadily into the night sky. The flight was scheduled to last just over 6 hours. Everything proceeded as expected. At 1:19 a.m., as the aircraft approached the edge of Malaysian airspace, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah made his final transmission. Good night. Malaysian 370. It was a routine sign-off.com, professional, and without any sign of distress. A few seconds later, the aircraft's transponder, which identifies the plane to radar systems, stopped transmitting. Within moments, Flight MH370 vanished from air traffic control screens. Controllers in Kuala Lumpur assumed the aircraft had entered Vietnamese airspace, but Vietnam never made contact. Repeated calls to the cockpit went unanswered. Within minutes, what had been an ordinary flight became a mystery. As dawn broke, no distress signal had been received, no emergency beacon activated. The aircraft had seemingly disappeared without a trace. Authorities initiated a search and rescue operation in the South China Sea. The last known location of the flight before contact was lost. Ships and aircraft were dispatched from multiple countries, but there was nothing. No debris, no signal, no sign of life. In the hours that followed, confusion spread. Malaysia Airlines initially assured families that communication might be re-established, but as the day went on, that hope faded. By evening, it became clear that MH370 was missing completely. The passengers represented a cross-section of the modern world. Business travelers, students, tourists, and families. People from China, Malaysia, Australia, and beyond. Their stories became human symbols of a tragedy without explanation. In Beijing, relatives gathered at the airport's arrival gate, waiting anxiously as hours turned into days. When the Malaysian military reviewed its radar data, they made a shocking discovery. The plane hadn't gone down in the South China Sea at all. Instead, radar showed that MH370 had turned sharply west, crossing back over the Malaysian peninsula, an unexpected and unauthorized maneuver. The aircraft had flown for another several hours after civilian radar lost contact, heading toward the vast emptiness of the southern Indian Ocean. This revelation changed everything. The initial search area in the South China Sea was wrong. The disappearance was no longer just a case of mechanical failure or weather. Someone had changed the plane's course. But who and why? Speculation began almost immediately. Was it a hijacking? A deliberate act by one of the pilots? A technical malfunction that caused communication systems to fail? Or something more complex? A series of cascading failures that ended in tragedy far from civilization. Governments and aviation experts around the world mobilized. The Indian Ocean, one of the most remote and unforgiving places on Earth, became the center of one of the largest search operations in history. Advanced sonar, satellite data, and underwater drones were deployed to scour thousands of square miles of ocean. Yet, despite the effort, no wreckage was found. It was as if Flight MH370 had simply evaporated into thin air. As weeks turned into months, the world's attention fixated on a single question. How could a modern aircraft, equipped with multiple tracking systems, vanish completely in the age of satellites and real-time communication? The disappearance of Flight MH370 was not just an aviation mystery, it was a modern paradox. And it was only the beginning. Within hours of losing contact with Flight MH370, an unprecedented international search effort began to take shape. Malaysia, Vietnam, China, and Thailand launched ships and aircraft into the South China Sea, scouring every possible area where the plane might have gone down. For the families of the 239 people aboard, every moment without news was agony. In Beijing, relatives waited at the airport for updates that never came. Television cameras captured their faces, confusion, disbelief, and fear, as Malaysian Airlines officials read brief statements offering little information. In Kuala Lumpur, journalists crowded the airline's headquarters, pressing for answers that no one had. But as the hours stretched into days, something became increasingly clear. The plane hadn't crashed where it was supposed to. Radar data from the Malaysian military suggested something almost unbelievable. About an hour after takeoff, MH370 had turned sharply left, a maneuver that would have required manual control, and crossed back over the Malay Peninsula. Instead of continuing northeast toward Beijing, the aircraft was now flying west, directly away from its intended path. It then veered northwest, flying over the Strait of Malacca before radar contact was lost completely near the Andaman Sea. This was no longer a case of a simple crash. The flight had traveled hundreds of miles off course with no communication, no distress call, and no explanation. The Malaysian government, facing mounting international scrutiny, expanded the search area drastically. Dozens of ships, aircraft, and satellites from 26 countries joined the operation. The search zone now covered over 2.9 million square miles, nearly the size of the continental United States. But the vastness of the Indian Ocean posed an enormous challenge. It's one of the most remote and deepest bodies of water on Earth, with areas so isolated that even military satellites rarely capture consistent data. The deeper investigators looked, the less sense the disappearance made. Experts began combing through every available data source, radar readings, satellite logs, and even the plane's last automatic handshakes with a British satellite network known as Inmarsat. Those signals, tiny bursts of digital data sent every hour, suggested that MH370 had continued flying for at least 6 hours after its transponder went dark. This meant the plane might have traveled thousands of miles from its last known position before running out of fuel. Based on those satellite pings, analysts drew two possible arcs, one stretching north toward Central Asia, and another heading south into the endless expanse of the Indian Ocean. The northern route seemed implausible. It would have required crossing multiple countries, airspaces without being detected by radar, an almost impossible feat. That left the southern route, toward some of the most desolate ocean on Earth. Still, no debris was found. No oil slicks, no floating luggage, no trace of the plane's 200-foot wingspan. For aviation experts, this was unfathomable. Modern aircraft don't simply vanish. They leave behind wreckage, signals, or, at the very least, an emergency beacon. But MH370 left nothing. As the days turned to weeks, frustration grew. Families of the passengers accused Malaysian officials of withholding information or mishandling the investigation. Press conferences became emotional and chaotic. Every new rumor was seized upon as a potential breakthrough, only to fade away when proven false. Meanwhile, the search continued. Ships towing sonar arrays, aircraft scanning endless ocean, and satellites analyzing the smallest changes in sea surface patterns. The world watched in disbelief as one of the most technologically advanced searches in history failed to produce a single answer. Then, as hope began to fade, a new discovery changed everything. Investigators realized that one of the final satellite pings came from far south, deep into the Indian Ocean west of Australia. The area was so remote that even shipping routes avoided it. It was here, in this vast and empty part of the world, that investigators believed flight MH370 had met its end. The focus of the search shifted again, this time to one of the most challenging environments on Earth. But as search vessels and submersibles descended into the dark ocean depths, they soon discovered that solving the mystery of MH370 would not be so simple. For over a year, the ocean had kept its secrets. The search teams from Malaysia, Australia, China, and dozens of other nations had scoured the vast emptiness of the southern Indian Ocean with ships, sonar, and deep-sea drones. Every ping, Every faint echo beneath the waves had been investigated, and every time it led to nothing. But then, on July 29, 2015, hope washed ashore, literally. On the island of Réunion, a small French territory off the coast of Madagascar, a local beach cleaner named Johnny Begg noticed something heavy wedged among the seaweed. It was a long, white piece of aircraft wreckage, battered, barnacle-covered, but unmistakably part of a plane. The object was quickly identified as a flaperon, a control surface from a Boeing 777. There were only a handful of Boeing 777s ever lost at sea, and only one that had vanished without a trace: Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370. For investigators, this was the first piece of physical evidence that the plane had indeed ended its journey somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean, just as satellite data had suggested. But the discovery raised almost as many questions as it answered. The flaperon's condition told a strange story. It appeared to be mostly intact, with no signs of explosive damage or fire. The barnacles covering it indicated that it had been floating for a long time, but ocean drift. Models suggested it had traveled thousands of kilometers from the suspected crash site. If correct, the ocean's currents had carried it westward across the Indian Ocean for over a year before landing on Réunion. Soon after, other fragments began appearing. In Mozambique, Tanzania, Madagascar, and Mauritius, bits of fuselage, interior panels, a wing flap. Each discovery renewed attention, but none could pinpoint the main wreck. Families of the victims clung to these finds as proof, bittersweet proof that their loved ones had indeed perished. But the lack of a crash site or bodies made closure impossible. Experts meticulously analyzed each piece. The flaperon's position indicated that it might have broken off during a slow, controlled descent rather than a high-speed crash. Some took this as evidence that the aircraft had glided into the ocean, suggesting someone was still at the controls at the very end. But who and why? Theories once again divided the community. The pilot suicide theory gained new momentum. Some argued that Captain Zahari had planned the disappearance, disabling communication and flying south deliberately until the plane ran out of fuel, ditching it smoothly into the sea. Others refused to believe it, citing his professional record and lack of motive. Then came the autopilot theory that the plane flew itself after the crew became incapacitated, eventually running out of fuel and spiraling down. The debris gentle damage pattern, however, didn't fit with an uncontrolled crash. Malaysia's official investigation faced immense criticism. For many, the handling of the search and communication had been chaotic. The French authorities, who took the lead on the Réunion flaperon, confirmed it was almost certainly from MH370, yet every confirmation only deepened the mystery of how such a modern plane could vanish so completely. As pieces of the puzzle literally drifted ashore, the ocean itself seemed to mock humanity's technology. We could track satellites orbiting Mars, but not a passenger jet carrying 239 people across Earth's own skies. By 2017, after years of searching and billions of dollars spent, the official underwater hunt was called off. The vast, featureless seabed had yielded nothing more. For many, MH370 had officially become a ghost, swallowed by the Indian Ocean and time. But the story didn't end there. In 2018, an independent American company launched a private search, claiming new data might lead to the wreck. And as new analyses emerged from oceanographers, data scientists, and even amateur sleuths online, another shocking possibility began to surface. Maybe MH370 didn't simply get lost. Maybe it was deliberately made to disappear. By 2016, the disappearance of Flight MH370 had entered the realm of legend, a modern aviation enigma that seemed to defy all logic. While investigators scoured satellite data and ocean currents, a growing chorus of theorists questioned the official narrative. Governments, some suggested, were withholding crucial information. Malaysia faced intense scrutiny. Critics argued that initial reports were inconsistent, search areas were miscommunicated, and radar data had been released only partially, sometimes contradicting earlier statements. Families of the passengers accused the authorities of deliberate misinformation, claiming that mismanagement had obscured the truth. Speculation quickly extended beyond the Malaysian government. Some theorists proposed military involvement. Diego Garcia, a heavily guarded U.S. military base in the Indian Ocean, became central to one persistent hypothesis. Satellite imagery and radar gaps fueled claims that MH370 had been intentionally diverted or intercepted. Skeptics argued that governments might have seized the aircraft to protect sensitive cargo, passengers, or technology. Others proposed cyber sabotage. Could someone remotely interfere with a modern Boeing 777, overriding communication systems and autopilot? These ideas seemed far-fetched, yet experts could not completely dismiss them. The plane's disappearance, after all, was unprecedented. Then there were the psychological theories. Some suggested pilot suicide or deliberate action, a premeditated event orchestrated by someone in the cockpit. Investigators examined Captain Zahari's background and personal life, looking for motive, stress, or political statements. Despite public fascination, no definitive evidence ever confirmed these claims. In parallel, amateur sleuths and online communities dissected every piece of available information. Satellite handshakes, debris drift models, even weather patterns were analyzed in painstaking detail. Every anomaly sparked debates. Was the plane gliding on autopilot? Had it made a controlled ditching? Were governments manipulating radar data to cover a mistake, or worse? The media narrative itself fueled the mystery. Newspapers and television programs repeated rumors and theories alongside official statements, blurring the line between fact and speculation. Global audiences were captivated not just by the mystery, but by the possibility of a hidden truth, a story that official reports might never fully explain. Even the discovery of debris could not end the questions. Flaperones, wing fragments, and other panels only confirmed that the plane ended in the Indian Ocean, not how, why, or by whose hand. In some ways, each new discovery deepened the intrigue. Families, investigators, and the world at large were left with fragments, physical, digital, and emotional, forming a puzzle that refused to be completed. Every theory had gaps. Every official statement left room for doubt. As the years passed, MH370 became more than a missing aircraft. It became a symbol of human limitations in the face of technology and nature. A reminder that even in the age of satellites, airplanes, and global communication, some mysteries remain beyond reach. The theories persisted because the answers did not. Experts debated, the media speculated, governments remained silent on certain questions, and the world continued to search for explanations, or perhaps for closure that would never come. By the late 2010s, Flight MH370 had become a modern enigma, a puzzle built from fragments, theories, and unanswered questions. And yet, for every theory disproved or dismissed, new ones emerged, each more audacious than the last, ensuring that the story would never truly end. The disappearance had transcended the realm of aviation. It had become a global mystery, a haunting narrative of uncertainty, and an enduring cautionary tale about the fragility of human knowledge in an unpredictable world. Years have passed since the disappearance of Flight MH370, but the mystery endures. In aviation history, few events have captivated the world like this modern enigma. It was not a spectacular crash, nor a dramatic rescue. It was something far more unsettling, a complete vanishing in the era of satellites, radar, and global communication. For the families of the 239 people aboard, closure has remained elusive. Many cling to hope, while others have painfully accepted uncertainty. Each anniversary of March 8th brings renewed reflection, grief, and media attention. The passenger stories, students, professionals, and families are remembered not just as victims, but as symbols of the human desire to understand the incomprehensible. Globally, MH370 has reshaped how people perceive aviation safety and crisis response. Investigators analyzed every possible scenario, from catastrophic mechanical failure to intentional human action. The search and rescue operation became the largest in history, involving dozens of nations. Advanced satellite technology, deep-sea drones, and billions of dollars in resources. Yet, despite the scale and sophistication, the ultimate fate of the aircraft remains uncertain. The debris discovered on islands across the Indian Ocean offered fragments of truth, but no complete picture. The flaperon wing fragments and interior panels confirmed that the plane ended its journey in the southern Indian Ocean, yet they failed to explain the how, the why, or the circumstances surrounding its disappearance. Each new discovery raised more questions than it answered. Theories continue to circulate, from hijacking and pilot involvement to accidental military intervention. Online communities, independent investigators, and amateur sleuths have meticulously analyzed satellite data, drift models, and available evidence. Each hypothesis adds depth to the mystery, but no theory has been universally accepted. The truth, if it exists, remains beyond reach. Flight MH370 also became a cautionary tale about the limits of technology and human oversight. In an age where almost every movement can be tracked, a modern aircraft carrying nearly 250 people vanished from the sky. Governments, corporations, and the public were reminded that despite advanced systems, uncertainty can still prevail, and some questions may remain unanswered forever. Culturally, the disappearance has inspired documentaries, books, podcasts, and international debates. It is frequently referenced in discussions of aviation safety, satellite tracking, and modern mysteries. It has captured the collective imagination, much like the disappearances of the Solder children or the Dyatlov Pass incident. MH370 is more than a missing flight. It is a phenomenon, a story of uncertainty, loss, and human fascination with the unknown. And yet, despite years of investigation and speculation, one truth remains indisputable. The disappearance of Flight MH370 has changed the way the world looks at aviation, technology, and the unknown. It serves as a stark reminder that even in an era of unprecedented information, some mysteries resist explanation. Today, the southern Indian Ocean remains a silent grave, its depths holding answers that may never be recovered. The story of MH370 continues to haunt experts, families, and the global public. It is a story of human vulnerability, the fragility of life, and the endless pursuit of understanding. As long as the questions persist, who, why, hey, and how Flight MH370 will remain a haunting testament to one of the greatest mysteries of the modern world. And perhaps that is its enduring legacy, a flight that disappeared, but left an entire world searching for answers it may never find.